everyone and welcome! Even though we have covered the entire history of the Shadow Isles, where we have talked about every single champion connected to this area, there are champions that deserve more attention, especially with the new information about magic. So let's have a look at the spirit of nature, Maokai. Long before living memory, a chain of islands erupted from deep beneath the ocean tides as blank slates of rock and clay. With its creation, the nature spirit Maokai was born. He took the form of a treant, with his tall body covered in bark and long limbs resembling branches. Maokai felt the profound loneliness of the land and its potential for teeming growth. He wandered from island to island in search of signs of life, growing ever more sorrowful in his solitude. On an island covered in soft, rich soil, Maokai sensed a boundless energy radiating from deep beneath the ground. He plunged his great roots downward until they reached a spring of magical life-giving water and drank deeply. From this potent liquid, he grew hundreds of saplings and planted them across the islands. Soon the land was covered with forests, groves of towering pine trees, and tangled woods, all steeped with wondrous magic. Magnificent sky trees with expansive canopies and thickly winding roots covered the isles with lush green foliage. Nature spirits were drawn to the lavish vegetation, and animals reveled in the fertile greenery. When humans eventually came to the islands, they too thrived in the land's abundance and formed an enlightened society of scholars devoted to studying the world's mysteries. Though Maokai was wary of their presence, he saw how they respected the sanctity of the land. Sensing the deep magic within the woods, the humans built their homes in areas not heavily forested, to avoid disturbing any nature spirits. Maokai occasionally revealed himself directly to those he trusted, and blessed them with knowledge of the Verdant Isles, even its greatest gift, the underground spring that could heal mortal wounds. Centuries passed, and Maokai lived in an idyllic contentment. That was until a fleet of soldiers from across the sea beached up upon the shores of the Isles. Maokai sensed something was terribly wrong. Their grief-maddened king bore the corpse of his queen, and in hopes of reviving her, he bathed her decaying flesh in the healing waters. Reanimated as a rotting corpse, the queen begged to return to death. The king wanted to reverse what he had done, unwillingly casting a terrible curse upon the land. From leagues away, Maokai felt the first ripples of the disaster that would soon devastate the Isles. He sensed a horrific force gathering beneath the soil, and a bitter chill washed over him. As the ruination spread, Maokai desperately plunged his roots into the ground and drank of the healing waters, saturating every fiber of his being with their magic. Before the cursed water reached him, Maokai withdrew the roots, severing all connection to the pool. He howled in rage as the sacred reservoir he had entrusted to man was fully corrupted. Moments later, the mist surrounding the islands blackened and spread over the land, trapping all living things in an unnatural state between life and death. Maokai watched in helpless agony as all he knew, plants, nature spirits, animals and humans alike, twisted into wretched shades. His fury grew. The great beauty he had cultivated from tiny saplings fell to ruin in an instant at the careless hand of man. The mist coiled around Maokai, and he wept as the bright flowers adoring his shoulders crumbled and fell to dust. His body shuddered and contorted into a mass of gnarled roots and tangled branches as the mist leached life from him. But Maokai's heartwood was saturated with the precious waters of life, saving him from the terrible fate of undeath. As grotesque raids and horrific abominations flooded the land, Maokai was overcome by a host of lifeless men. He struck the spirits with his branch-like limbs in manic violence. Realizing the force of his blows could shatter them to dust, Maokai shuddered with revulsion. He had never killed before. He flew at the breathless shapes in frenzy, but hundreds more overwhelmed him, and eventually he was forced to retreat. With his home decimated and his companions turned to deathless horrors, Maokai was tempted to try and escape the nightmare of the Isles. But from deep within his twisted form, he felt the sacred waters giving him life. He had survived the ruination by carrying the very heart of the islands within him, and he would not abandon his home now. As the Blessed Isle's first nature spirit, he would remain and fight for the soul of the land. Though surrounded by endless hosts of malicious foes and darkening mist, Maokai fights with ferocious vengeance to conquer the evil that plagues the Isles. His only pleasure comes from dealing savage violence to the soulless wraiths who roam his land. Some days Maokai subdues the mist and its deathless spirits, breaking their hold on the groves of trees and small thickets. Though new life has not bloomed in such cursed soil for an age, Maokai strives to crave havens, however temporary, free from regret and decay. So long as Maokai continues to fight, hope remains, for steepled within his heartwood are the uncorrupted waters of life, and the last remaining chance of restoring the Isles. If the land returns to its joyous state, Maokai too will shed his twisted form. The nature spirit brought life to these Isles long ago, and he refuses to rest until the Isles bloom once more. The story continues with Maokai's quest on the Shadow Isles. The chill wind whipped through the cracks in his bark with a hollow whistling sound. He shivered. His limbs had long forgotten the warmth of summer. The towering shapes around him fractured and fell in the gale, the lives within dead long ago. Now they were his silent companions. Their brittle trunks remained only as empty husks, rough grey sketches of lush forest that once bloomed around. A spirit waved between the trees in front of him, pale and spectral against the night air. A knot tightened in his bark. Normally he would lash his roots through his heart, but today he held still, trying not to alert the wraiths to his presence. Maokai was tired of resisting. Its moon-like eyes were empty. There was nothing alive and vulnerable to fuel its cold bitterness on this island, nothing to be haunted or consumed. The spirit slipped between the trees, leaving Maokai to his solitude. He looked across the forest of shadows and his branches wavered. His gaze caught a tiny flame of red growing amid the endless grey. Nestled in the black dirt, the smallest flower bud pushed from the ground, its petals so bright they burned his eyes. It was a Nightbloom. Long ago they carpeted the floor of the Blessed Isles, blooming on the evening of the summer solstice. By morning the flowers wilted, leaving only blackened petals, not to be seen again until the following year. But for one night they illuminated the forest with blazing crimson, as if the very ground was aflame. Maokai looked around, and for a fleeting moment he hoped that if one flower blooms, there might be others. But there was only the somber grey of the dead Isles. His boughs creaked as he took a shaky step forward. He approached the bloom, transfixed, crushing ashen leaves to dust underfoot. His colossal frame towered over the delicate shape. He leaned down until his face was inches above the sweet-scented petals. The potent groundwater within the heartwood stirred, awakening in recognition of life. The flower's neck was tilted, as if curious. Deep vermilion veins spread across each petal, and its pale green stem was coated with hundreds of silvery velvet soft hairs. He could spend eternity basking in its every facet. Every moment it grew and shifted in subtle ways. Its stem pushed ever higher while its petals slowly unfurled. He watched as the bloom spread to reveal the filaments extending from within, its heady scent flooding his mind with color. For a moment he forgot the cold, the hollow wind, and his bitterness. A pale light flickered and Maokai flinched. A glowing shape approached. His bark tingled. Nothing from these bloodless woods is an ally. The cursed spirit returned, attracted to the lure of movement. Life was not as still as death. Maokai flexed his limbs in fury, no longer eluding violence. He welcomed it. For one night, a living thing would exist on these barren isles, unmarred by corrupt forces. The spirit glided toward him. She was once a human, but now she was translucent and bone-white. Her blank expression grew ravenous as she saw the blood-red blossom. The spectre raced over the flower and tried to inhale its fragile life. Before the bloom withered into a lifeless shade, Maokai flinged his limbs forward and lashed them at the spirit's legs. She screeched, recoiling as if burned, and Maokai roared. The groundwater within him was like a fire to these unnatural beings. She twisted and broke free from his grasp. Maokai hoisted his roots and smashed them to the ground. The impact split the barren topsoil and sent shockwaves through the earth. The reverberations hit the wraith and she reeled in agony. Maokai laughed bitterly. As she stirred, he slinged his limbs through her form and she dissolved. Dusky mist raised from the ground, accompanied by foul stench. As the wind moaned, dozens of spirits materialized before him, their narish faces gaping silently at the scene before them. The Nightbloom and Maokai grew before the wall of shadows. He would not let them destroy this one pure thing inside the darkness. He threw all his rage into his blows, driving them back with furious strength. He couldn't destroy every spirit on the Isles, but he could hold them off for a time. A wraith tried to dart past him. Maokai howled as he lifted his roots and pierced his heart. His strength was draining with so many spirits nearby, but he refused to concede. The flower grew brightly beneath the moonlight, oblivious to this battle for its very existence. A single crimson petal fell from its perfect blossom like a drop of blood. The life cycle of the bloom was near its end, bringing death and with it respite. But Maokai did not crave it. He felt he could cleanse the entire island of its scourge in his fury. The cursed mist had risen above the tree line and swirled in great clouds. An endless host of spirits poured from the fog, mouths agape with ghoulish hunger. Maokai raised to his greatest height and slammed his limbs into the ravenous spirits, shattering one after another into dust. Still more came. He howled as he stirred the air into a crudely twisting spiral and nourished the storm with his wrath until it expanded into a whirlwind. He reveled in the chaos as the maelstrom surged in the frenzied circle around him and the flower. It blasted spirits violently back beyond the trees. From within this nightmare, Maokai had carved a sanctuary where life could grow. He turned to the flower. They were silent together at the eye of the storm, still amidst the madness. A second fiery petal fell from the Nightbloom, then another. Maokai's energy drained into the maelstrom, but he did not falter and the tempest raged on. With each passing moment, the blossom drooped further until it faced the ground. It was perfect in its slow, natural decay. He couldn't look away as it gradually lost its crown of flaming petals and wilted completely. It was dead. He lowered his branches and the maelstrom quieted. Above him, the sky was slate grey, as bright as it ever got in this grim place. The gloom of the mist returned once more and the spirits arrived. Their faces were blank, no longer sensing the illicit life of the Nightbloom, no longer anticipating the joy of a fresh kill. They retreated into the hollow woods. Maokai whipped his roots through a spectre as it passed him, scattering its essence into the fading mist. The others edged further away from him as they returned to their gloom. Though the land appeared unchanged, these isles were not the same grey wasteland they were yesterday. The waters of life stirred within him, and the soil beneath his roots was fertile again. Though its petals decayed into dust, the luminous Nightbloom burned fire bright in his mind, igniting Maokai's fury. Just as these lands were born of burning rock, he would cleanse them of their pestilence in a flaming blaze. He followed the trailing spirits as they slipped between the hollow trees. They would pay for their wickedness. And that was the story of Maokai. With this story, not only do we know how the Shadow Isles became the Shadow Isles, but we also know the history of the Blessed Isles. So now we have yet another building block for the world of League of Legends. But that's it for this video. If you enjoyed it, feel free to rate it and subscribe for more lore. You can also follow us on Twitter, Facebook and Discord if you'd like to chat. There is also the Instagram account for pictures of coffee. I want to thank all of our Patreons for going the extra mile. And to the rest of you, thank you so much for being here and for your support. you know I really appreciate it. And as always, thank you come again.